we love our community, that we know it takes a great effort to get here, and for a lot of you came quite a distance, so we appreciate that. We love you. I'm surprised that Bob and I have done so well with names. We figured we wouldn't even remember each other's names today. We're doing okay. I want to, I guess all of you know, our son's family is at that far table. Ken, Amy, Wyatt, and Hannah are grandchildren. And then Debbie's family with Debbie and Justin walking around. Alyssa and Alyssa's friend, Kelsey, she was in charge of the flower arrangements all over the table. She and Alyssa did a beautiful job. Debbie's been working on this for a year, and she has just been absolutely amazing. And she started it out as a surprise. I'm so glad that we found out so that we could enjoy the anticipation and we could add some names that were important to us. And I think we're going to kind of collapse tomorrow, all of us. This is fun, but it is kind of a nerve-wracking experience too. I want to thank our neighborhood our community photographer, Donna Ritchie, who takes many beautiful pictures around our community. A dear friend, new friend in our ward, Don Haggerty, who kindly was at the guest book and told all of you where to go as you came in. Been wanting to do that for years, and she got to do it. How incredible is it that our best man, the second best man in our wedding is here, as well as my maid of honor. How amazing is that after my maid of honor and Bob Cox back there, and then Donna Kokenauer. She was actually one of the girls who carried gifts for me, and couldn't believe that Donna and Mary Ann saved their dresses from the wedding. So it's been wonderful. We want to let all of you know that when this is over, and it's not over yet, but when it is, we have a lot of finger foods and things at our house. We'd love to have you see where we live as long as you came all this way. And just stay as long as you want and visit. We've got tables. Now, overnight is a problem. We have to do sleeping camps. But every person in this room has a meaning to us, including a friend who came with a friend at that far table. Thank you again so much. We love all of you. And I have to acknowledge one last thing. It's been a wonderful 50 years with this man. He has led me on more adventures than we ever thought we'd ever have when we started out our lives together. And he's been considerate. He's been encouraging with anything that I wanted to do, friends that I wanted to have, and activities that I wanted to do. We see things from very opposite points of view, but I think that enriches our lives and the two of us as a couple, because we show different perspectives. Anyway, I've said enough. Thank you. We love you, and enjoy the rest of the meal. And then I hope we'll see most of you over to our house.
You have maps.
Oh, at our table, I have envelopes with maps to our house. If anybody wants to know how to get there, it's easy, but we have the maps. And when you get to our name, all of our streets, as you figured out, are all curvy, windy, little hilly streets. So you just kind of have to, unfortunately, park wherever you find a place. And for those who would like to go to church tomorrow, we have maps on how to get to our ward also. So if you want to
I don't know, is there a card?
We need to get some Bob.
Yeah. We want Bob. We want Bob. We want Bob. We want Bob.
I don't know if there's a card for this one. Not, okay.
Now I'm scared.
It's from the Coxes and the...
Okay, outstanding. What did you do? Okay, I'm just... Oh, who made this? Who did this? Polly? Oh. Rod, when did you get here?
It was debatable.
Oh, I know that, but you're here.
Sure.
His wife is in the process of making a dozen quilts at 81 time. She is incredible. I miss her. Look at that. Wow.
That's one to keep.
Get on one side.
Get him right side up.
That's from the Neils and the Coxes too.
Okay, we need to.
Oh my golly, Your Eminence, you're here.
I have to send this to my wife so that when you're finished, I'll walk
Oh my
closer.
goodness, it's our pictures. Oh, that's amazing.
Kathy, be sure and turn it around as well. We understand Bob was Kathy's clown.
I gotta see that. And we didn't miss
Oh.
that is so And it's got the haircut I gave Bob. I only nicked him a little bit. He needed his haircut for water polo. Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, everybody.
About 6 weeks ago, Kathy came running down the hall, papers in her hand, and says, "We have 65 people coming for lunch." And I understood the panic. She said, "I'm going to invite them all to stop by the house afterwards if they have a chance. And of course, you know, when we have company, we need the house clean, so here's your list." I've only lived in that house 3 years. I didn't know we had that many windows that needed replaced. And I found out we've got more toilets that needed scrubbing. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was she said, "Well, now that they're clean and we've got guests coming, you can't use them." So anyone coming to the house, you now know the story of the dead bush over the back wall. Chris, I'm sorry about that. I'll buy you a new bush sometime. We lived in Santa Ana, the first house we ever had. We lived there 41 years. And it's the story of how I got to Canyon Lake that I want to share with you so that you know why we're here. Our daughter said, "Dad, at your age, I'm not driving 50 miles every time you need help going to the bathroom." So I was on a business trip to Laredo, Texas. I was in a hotel working on my laptop, and the phone rang, and it was our son. "Dad, you know what your wife is doing?" And I said, "Yeah, she and Debbie like to go out and look at new houses and things like that. And I think they're out going through some homes in Canyon Lake." And he says, "Dad, she bought a house." And I said, "No, Ken, you don't understand. California is a community property state. We have to buy these things together. I have to sign papers and everything." And no, she didn't buy a house. Ken explained, "Dad, I'm sitting in Debbie's living room with the real estate agent, and she's finalizing the purchase." Yeah, it happened that way, so I did. And there was one One little technicality that she didn't explain to me, she says, yes, I picked out the house. I sent out an email saying that we're moving to Canyon Lake and I'm inviting you to move with me if you want. And I said, is there really a need for me to move to a house in Canyon Lake? And she says, yes, somebody has to pay for it. So I still, after 50 years, serve a valuable purpose. Sometimes I wonder what that's all about. We have made friends out here, but as you can tell from today, we don't give up the old ones. There was a time when I went to a state dance festival, and while my group was waiting to perform, there was a group on the stage, Beehive Girls, dressed in short black skirts, white blouses, top hats, and canes. They were doing the little hat and cane dance. As I looked down the row, I kept coming back to one in particular that caught my eye. Later that evening, I was introduced to a girl named Kathy. And I remember at a mature age, she was 13, I was 15, but old enough to know it was love at first sight, at least on my part. The next 4 years, we enjoyed, off and on, what could be described as a tumultuous dating relationship. Sometimes on, sometimes off. Sometimes we were speaking to each other. Other times we were not speaking to each other, usually my fault. Graduated from high school. I went off to college. I was a year ahead of her. I knew that she was continuing her enjoyment of dating lots of different guys. Not what I had in mind, but that was something she enjoyed. It got to be a joke almost. We lost one of our Lennox Ward group a couple of years ago. Our friend Rod Vogel hosted a memorial service at his home. And the joke of the evening was, as everyone sat around there, Rod asked the question, you remember what that was, Rod? Anyone who hasn't dated Kathy Wight, please raise their hand. She was not a big fan of going steady, especially with me. Second year, she's at BYU, and during that summer, during one of our off periods, I had started dating the state president's daughter, and name escapes me at the moment. So now we're at BYU. Kathy is still dating. Thank you. Kathy is still enjoying the social life. I'm hanging out with the state president's daughter. And it's now April, and Bob Cox and I had just received our mission calls. He was going to Ireland, and I was going to Eastern Canada. I was sitting in the field house at BYU when Kathy walked over and held out her hand, and there was her engagement ring, and it wasn't mine. I described that event as the worst day of my life because I knew I had screwed up and it wasn't going to be. 2 months later, we went to the airport, saw Bob off to Ireland. A week later, a group of the Lennox Ward gang took me down to Union Depot in LA so I could take the train to Salt Lake. I remember going down the line. Toward the end of the line, I did the honorable thing. I had gotten engaged just before I left, not to her. Kissed my fiancée goodbye, and I shook her hand. Hers. Yeah, wasn't a really good day that day either. Spent a week in Salt Lake at the mission home, and the last day we were there, we were taken over to the church offices to be set apart for our mission calls. Walking down the hall, I was directed into this office. The name on the door was Nathan Eldon Tanner, first counselor to the president of the church. I had died and gone to heaven because I knew about him, loved and respected him for what he was and what he did. It was interesting because during my blessing, he said, "Don't worry, don't be concerned while you're in the mission fields. There will be a girl waiting for you when you get home." And I thought, I already took care of that. I'm engaged. Not the right one, but at least I'm going to have somebody waiting. A year later, I got the phone call. Turns out my fiance, whatever her name was, decided that sitting in the dorm at night, weekends, not dating, not going out, wasn't for her. And I found myself unengaged again. Turns out that Kathy, about that same time, had broken her engagement as well. We didn't know that about each other. So shortly thereafter, I found out about that, and I initiated what Elder LeGrand Richards, in his book entitled A Marvelous Work and a Wonder, I put a plan together. I started writing letters to Kathy. About every other week, we would exchange very platonic letters. But after a while, I knew that things were changing. I detect this sexual connotation between the lines. Little phrases or things like, "How's the weather in Toronto this week?" Or, "My mother still doesn't like you." I knew we were progressing. A month before I came home, I sent a letter to my parents and to Kathy, and I said, "This is the day I'm coming home. Meet me at the airport." And she fired back and she said to my mother, "This is going to be kind of awkward because the state president's daughter, whatever her name was, that your son is engaged to, will be there also." Turns out Kathy found out that I wasn't engaged after all. Down the jetway, 5 people at the end waiting to greet me. I shook my father's hand. I gave my mother a hug. I shook her father's hand. I shook her mother's hand, and I thought, it's appropriate I shake her hand as well. Hell no. Putting my arms around her and giving her the biggest kiss I could muster after 2 years of inactivity in the mission field. Her parents took us to dinner. We went to her home that evening, and the evening was over too soon. And then inspiration hit. I remembered my parents had a bedroom at their home where my grandmother was staying. Well, Grandma was in Utah visiting relatives, and that bedroom was empty. I invited Kathy out for the weekend. What a plan. 3 days with her, she was mine. And I could talk to her. There were no cell phones, no computers. I was going to have time to actually, hopefully, renew the acquaintance. We sat up talking most of the night, and I found myself, after 8 years of explaining things to her and feelings that I had never been able to express before. The next morning at breakfast, I told my parents that they were eating breakfast with their future daughter-in-law. Talk about fast, talk about quick. I waited 8 years for that. We went in Sunday night, took her home. Kathy very carefully took her mother into the kitchen, leaving her father there in the living room in his easy chair watching his first color television. It was Sunday night, 7 o'clock, Bonanza, his favorite program. So as soon as they were in the kitchen, I stepped up, being the old traditionalist. "Carlisle, I love your daughter. I've asked her to marry me. I would like your permission to to marry your daughter. He looked at me and uttered those famous 3 words, "Good luck, Bob. Now get out of the way, you're blocking." Yeah. It took 8 years, and that was the start. 58 years ago, we've known each other. The last 50 and the best of my life. Can't imagine life without her. Waited, wondered, prayed about it, thought about it, and I just got lucky. There was a 1950s, 60s Hollywood power couple. It was Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward. And every time Paul Newman was interviewed, because he was such a hunk, some reporter would ask, yeah, you're married to Joanne Woodward, and yeah, she's a babe, but, you really could have any woman you wanted to if you want, we're interested. It irritated him, but he never had to come back until once a reporter asked him that same irritating question. And I loved his response, something that I've never forgotten. It was, why go out for a hamburger when you've got steak at home? I did even better. I'm not sure prime rib or filet mignon, but I did a whole lot better. My guiding light in the last 50 years has been, don't marry the woman you can live with, marry the one you can't live without. Thank you for coming.